provider.
And this week on the Communicators, it's a visit to the State of the Net conference in Washington, D.C. We'll be talking this week with a couple members of Congress about issues such as privacy and 5G. We'll also be talking with other government officials. Representative Kathy McMorris Rogers, when you left Republican leadership in the House, you basically had your choice of any committee you wanted. Why'd you choose Energy and Commerce?
I am excited to be on the Energy and Commerce right now, the Energy and Commerce Committee right now, because it's at the forefront of America's competitiveness. It's at the forefront of our future. The issues in front of the Energy and Commerce Committee are going to determine America's leadership in the world, and my goal is to make sure that we're leading on energy, on climate, on healthcare, on technology, 5G, driverless cars, closing the digital divide, making sure that America is leading and that the rest of the world is following our leadership.
Well, as the top Republican on the Consumer Protection Subcommittee, one of the issues before your subcommittee right now is privacy.
Yes.
Where's your marker? What do you want to have done?
Right. Well, it's very important that Congress act. It's important that we set a national standard for privacy in the United States of America. And right now what is happening is that we're starting to see a patchwork of laws across the country. California has led with CCPA that is going into effect right now. Other states are introducing their own laws. Washington State, my home state, has introduced legislation. There's nearly 80 separate bills being introduced at the state level that are addressing privacy because Congress isn't acting. And we need to pass a national standard, or we risk having a patchwork of laws across the states that are only going to cause more confusion for consumers and also make it difficult for businesses. We could run into a situation where a business would black out a state because their laws, the state laws might be in conflict with one another. So it just underscores the importance of Congress acting. I am encouraged and have been working very hard with the chair of the subcommittee, Jan Schakowsky, on a bipartisan bill. And in Congress right now, we're the only bipartisan bill in play. And we're continuing to hammer out important provisions. We released sections of a bipartisan privacy bill right before Christmas and asked for input on it. And our goal was to introduce language that would be stronger than California, that would ensure that consumers know that their information is protected. Also, beef up the enforcement at the, enforcement largely at the state level. I believe among the AGs and the AGs and the FTC, but we beefed up some at the FTC, but that we need to make sure that there's strong enforcement mechanisms, and the goal was to have language that is strong so that we don't continue to have some saying that we need a private right of action, because I fear a private right of action in privacy legislation will be a damper on the innovators and the small businesses in particular.
So the European Union came up with the GDPR. Are we heading in that direction?
I believe that we can do better and we need to do different than GDPR. GDPR is, yes, going into effect in Europe, and what you're seeing are increased compliance costs that are pretty dramatic. $1 to $10 million in compliance costs. That's a significant barrier to entry. And in America, my goal is to make sure that we continue to be the country that's leading in innovation and encouraging the startups. And if you create a significant barrier to entry around privacy and the regulations on privacy, that's going to be a damper on the small businesses and the startups. And so that's part of what we're hammering out here, is how to move forward with important privacy protections and a standard in place, but also that will ensure that the innovators and the startups can continue to be the next generation of competitors and disruptors.
What are the chances of a privacy bill coming through in an election year?
Some would say that it's a long shot. However, as the California law is being implemented, as other states are moving forward, I believe that there will be an increased awareness among people that this patchwork among the states is unworkable and isn't going to create the trust that we need to be building with consumers. So with that, there is an opportunity, and it will underscore the importance of Congress acting.
Part of your district in Washington is rural. How do you get 5G to your district, and is it important?
It may be the number. I think it's the number one issue right now. The number one issue in my district is closing that digital divide. It's foundational to our economy. It's foundational to our future. And as you think about communities in Eastern Washington and all over the country, the access to the internet is foundational to our economy. It's foundational to education. More and more of education is demanding access to the internet. Children are doing homework on the internet. They need to have access. Healthcare. I'm very excited about telehealth. I'm very excited about what it means for people who live in rural and underserved areas. And yet, if you don't have a broadband connection, it's useless. So closing the digital divide is critical. And 5G, yeah. I have areas in my district that still need 1G. So we have a long way to go, and it's going to be very important that this is addressed and that it is a priority at the national level.
Representative McMorris-Rodgers, the fact that Washington State is a technological leader, has that spilled over to Eastern Washington and Spokane,
Absolutely.
which you represent?
Yes, we're proud of being a tech leader, and in Washington or in Spokane right now, we have 3 companies just this year that have had 10 million plus investments and raised capital. We have 25 startups that we're celebrating. So it is fun to see the next generation and the new ideas that people continue to have to improve our lives and create efficiencies.
Kathy McMorris-Rodgers is the top Republican on the Consumer Protection Subcommittee of the Energy and Commerce Committee and has been our guest on the Communicators.
Good to be with you.
And joining us now on the Communicators is Congressman Will Hurd, a Republican from Texas. What was your talk about here at the State of the Net Conference?
I talk broadly about artificial intelligence, robocalls, the fact that it's 2020 and robocalls are still an issue. Almost 50% of the calls people get are robocalls. I talked a little bit about how we have to be prepared for technology, because the technological innovation we're going to see in the next 30 years is going to make the last 30 years look insignificant, and we must be ready.
Why do you say that about the next 30 years?
Because we need to be thinking beyond. It's hard for people up here in Congress to think more than just a month, from now. But we are in a global race. We are in a geopolitical struggle with China. China made their interests very clear. Back in 2015, they laid out a plan that said they're going to surpass the United States as the sole superpower, and they're going to do that by being a world leader in 10 areas of future technology: 5G, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, certain types of optics. And so this is, in essence, a struggle. And a couple of years ago, a bipartisan group of CEOs, generals, diplomats did a review that showed that the American military and economic dominance is no longer guaranteed. And so we have to recognize this place that we are in. We can continue to win. We can continue to be a leader in these areas, but this is an actual fight.
Congressman Hurd, we often talk to you about intelligence matters, given your background.
Sure.
You're on the Intel Committee. When it comes to China, there's an issue with stealing technology.
Sure.
And there's the issue of Huawei. What are your thoughts?
Well, look, so the Chinese are still stealing technology. They're using our laws to take technology in a legal way. I think the way you deal with that is real simple. If a U.S. company or investor can't do it in China, then a Chinese company or investor can't do it in the United States of America. If Amazon is not treated like a Chinese company in China, why are we treating Alibaba in the United States like it's a Chinese company, right? That's true reciprocity, and this is something that we're working on. Huawei is an extension of the Chinese government. There's no question about this. When you look at the heads of all these major Chinese companies, and there is a capital class in China, they all have a strong relationship back to the military, oftentimes to the intelligence services, and indeed to the communist ruling party. And so, but Huawei has 30% of the world market. So what are we doing with our leaders and our allies to make sure that the 5G technology, that is why the Germans are thinking about buying Samsung or Nokia versus Huawei? And why is China focused so much on the 5G infrastructure? And what is 5G? Why does that matter? In 5G, you're going to be able to download a 4K movie, the best quality, in like 3 seconds. That's awesome. But the real power of 5G is what's called latency. So you have a command on your phone, and that command goes to a server in the cloud, and it comes back to your phone. That trip is called latency. And under 5G, you're going to be able to do it in 10 nanoseconds. Why does 10 nanoseconds matter? Because we make decisions in 8 nanoseconds. So now 5G is going to allow us to have the entire power of the internet in real time. So that is what's going to empower artificial intelligence. And the Chinese know that. So whoever owns the 5G infrastructure, they want to make sure that they own the companies that sit on top of 5G, because those are going to be the next trillion-dollar companies, right? And so this is where it takes time to build this kind of infrastructure, and we need to be thinking of 6G and 7G or whatever the new communication technology, quantum communications, right? And so it's hard sometimes. The government plays a role in this, in basic research, but they also play a role in regulation and not making sure that we over-regulate this so that we can have these new technologies flourish.
Are we moving toward 2 worldwide webs, toward separate internets, US, China-based?
Look, you can make an argument that there already is one, right? You have one that's China-based. Now, you also have all the infrastructures that are within applications, right, and the apps on your phone. And so the fact that you can't move information from Facebook to another social media account, right? Those are, so you already have these little pockets where it's hard to get information out of. But I think consumers are going to demand an ease of transfer between various systems. And so yeah, I think we can, but ultimately, what we should be doing is making sure liberal, democratic, Western values is what is used as this technology develops, right? And not autocratic regimes. The Chinese, I always talk about facial recognition. The Chinese are spending a lot of time on facial recognition. And they're not doing this to make it easier for their citizens to buy groceries in the grocery store, so you can buy the groceries with your face. They're using this technology because they already are using it in one of their provinces called Xinjiang province, where they're using this technology to monitor an ethnic minority group called the Uyghurs, right? 1 million of them are already in concentration camps, and the Chinese are using this facial recognition technology to deal with them. And they're perfecting it. They basically have turned, Orwell's 1984 into a 21st century reality. And they're perfecting that in this one province. They're going to use it in the rest of China, and then they're going to share this with other autocratic regimes. Now, we should have our values defining this kind of technology, and that's why we have to continue to be a leader, and why we should be working with our allies, especially our European allies, on creating the rules of the road for technology in the future.
But there's a real slippery slope toward that social behavior contract and facial recognition and artificial intelligence. It's here in the States too, isn't it?
It is, but let's be simple. We already have rules against discrimination in housing, in discrimination of all kinds. So guess what? The algorithms and new technology need to adhere to those rules too. So there's a thing in artificial intelligence called bias, right? And this is broadly put into ethics. And guess what? A algorithm should not discriminate, right? If you're using an algorithm to make decisions on whether somebody gets a home loan or not, use discriminatory tactics now. You shouldn't be able to use it in the algorithm. So the people that are developing these algorithms have to ensure that they're able to detect bias and prepare for this. And so this is happening. The change and disruption is coming. We can't stop it, but we have to be ready for it. And I think we can take advantage of technology before it takes advantage of us.
As somebody with an Intel background, how do you protect your own data and privacy?
But starts with some simple things you can do. Have a long password, more than 14 characters. Make sure your software is patched, right? So that means, software may find a vulnerability in it. We know that there's a problem in the code, and so you're supposed to download the patch. So make sure the apps on your phone are up to date. Make sure the software in your computer is up to date. You do those things. And most importantly, do not click on links from people you do not know, right? Because most malware is perpetuated via what's called spear phishing or phishing campaigns. So don't click on emails from people you don't know. And a simple way to know, if you have interacted with that person before, their actual name will show up in the to line, right? But if their name doesn't show up and it's a long email and it may look like the person you know, don't click on it, right? And that's the best way. You do those three things, you're going to defend against like 80% of the bad things that are out there.
Should law enforcement be able to break into a phone?
Let me refine that question. If law enforcement can break into a phone and they have a warrant to do that and there's a reason to find that phone, that's one thing. But should law enforcement be telling a private company how to build their widget? And the answer to that is no. And this gets into the issue of backdoors to encryption is always a debate. A backdoor to encryption weakens encryption. We should be strengthening encryption, not weakening it. Encryption is a tool to protect ourselves. It's a tool to protect our society. And ultimately, law enforcement has a tough job. I've served alongside men and women in federal law enforcement, but there's never been a real case, or no one has presented a case to me where a case has gone cold because of encryption. And there's there's no such thing as an impenetrable device. Let's go to the San Bernardino shooter, the killer in San Bernardino, when they had that phone and there was a court case, FBI versus Apple. And in that case, you had the person's, the killer's email, you had the phone number, you knew all the apps that were on the phone, you got all the backups. And so FBI was able to get all the information that was available on the phone. And then when they broke into the phone, they found out there was nothing else on the phone that they didn't already have. And here is the reality is there's no such thing as an impenetrable device, and there's always ways to get access to that information. And if a federal law enforcement has a judicial order to get that information, then they should be able to use the tools they need to get that info.
Congressman Will Hurd, thanks for your time on the Communicators.
Always a pleasure.
And joining us now on the Communicators is Ellen Weintraub, who is a commissioner on the Federal Election Commission. Mrs. Weintraub, how is it that you were chair of the FEC during a Republican administration? How does that work?
Oh, the FEC is a bipartisan body and was designed that way. It's supposed to have 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats, or at least there's supposed to be no more than 3 members of any one political party. Right now we have a bit of a problem because there's only 3 commissioners, so that's a whole nother story. But the chairmanship rotates. Every year it goes back and forth. So last year I was the chair, this year a Republican is the chair.
And next year, will you be chair again if you're the only Democrat on the commission?
I'm really hoping it's not going to come to that, but a Democrat will be chair next year.
Well, what are you doing here at the State of the Net conference?
Well, I'm here to talk about technology and elections, and there's a lot of interest in the role of technology in our elections, and a lot of concerns about that. I know I'm one of those people who is concerned about it.
And what's your major concern right now?
Well, I think there are a lot of concerns that are related to technology. There are concerns about hacking, and that's a little bit out of my area of expertise. But I'm also concerned about how messages are being conveyed to the American people and whether they can trust those messages, whether they're getting information from American citizens or people who are masquerading as American citizens, as happened in the 2016 election. I'm worried about the amplification of disinformation and misinformation on social media platforms. And I'm concerned about whether the social media platforms are stepping up and doing everything that they can to ensure that they are not going to be provide a forum for people who are trying to undermine our democracy.
What's the Federal Election Commission's role in monitoring or enforcing those laws?
Well, our role in this area really goes to issues like disclaimers and whether the information is displayed, particular information on political ads, and whether people can tell when they see those ads where the ads are coming from and who's paying for them. That's our primary jurisdiction in this area, but as somebody who has been active in trying to protect the integrity of our government and our elections for my entire career, I personally have broader concerns than that.
Ellen Weintraub, hasn't disinformation been part of campaigns since 1783?
In a sense, but the problem is that the platforms provide this new mechanism where disinformation can spread at the speed of light, and any corrections that come after that never quite catch up. It's become a way for people to spread information without conveying who's really doing the talking. I don't think anybody really wants to get their news from a Russian troll farm, and yet that happened in 2016. So I think we all, in government and in industry, need to step up to do a better job to make sure that the American people are well informed and honestly informed and transparently informed about the issues of the day, so they can make well-reasoned and informed judgments on who to vote for in the election.
In your view, have the social media companies done their part?
I think they're trying. Some of them are trying harder than others. They're coming up with different solutions, and I think some of the solutions that different platforms are coming up with are better than other solutions. So we've seen, for example, Twitter is just trying to get out of the political ad game altogether. That may or may not be a great way of addressing these issues. It does deny people an opportunity to use that platform to get their message out, so that's a little bit concerning. Google has tried to address issues of micro-targeting, which I have been particularly concerned about, and has adopted a set of rules whereby they say they will not accept ads that are micro-targeted below the zip code level, and maybe for gender and age. And the importance of a rule like that is that it ensures that enough people will hear the advertisement so that if there is counter information that needs to be put forward, if people have contrasting views on the subject, that they will hear the ad and know that they need to speak out about it. Facebook is taking a very different approach, a much more hands-off approach. They're continuing to run political ads, unlike Twitter, but they're not really adopting a lot of restrictions on that. They're not going to be fact-checking, and they've declined to do anything about micro-targeting. And as I said, the issue with micro-targeting is that they take the data that they learn about you from all of this information that is available to Facebook. The people aren't consciously trying to tell Facebook and tell the advertisers about them. They're just going about their business, using the platform, liking some things, sharing some things, and Facebook is just sucking all that data out and using it to sell their platform to advertisers as a way to micro-target their ads, really custom design the ads, so that not only might you be getting different ads than your next door neighbor, but you might be getting different ads than the person sitting across the dinner table from you, based on how you use the platform and how they use the platform. So you couldn't even have necessarily a conversation over dinner as to what you are seeing on your feed and what information your partner might have that might contradict it. My point about the micro-targeting is that you need to have a broad enough audience so that these counter arguments can be brought forth and people will have a fair opportunity to evaluate different points of view.
Some of the solutions that have been proposed, though, seem to be stepping on free speech.
Well, I don't think so. If you are sharing the information with a broader audience, you're not restricting anyone's speech, you're sharing the speech more broadly. The standard First Amendment argument is that if you don't like what somebody has to say, you don't stop that person from saying it, you counter those arguments with your own arguments. But first you have to hear what they're saying. Counter speech has no value if you don't know what other people are saying.
With social media, if you or I wanted to advertise on Facebook, I don't think the other one would want the other one to censor our ad.
I'm not advocating censoring anybody's ad. I'm just saying that when they sell these ads, make sure they are selling them to they are going to be broadcasting them or digitally casting them to a broad enough audience that individuals can hear what the other side is saying and respond to it.
Ellen Weintraub, I want to go back to where we started, which is the advancement of technology with political campaigns. This has always been around. This has always been an issue where you might receive one letter, I receive another letter from our congressman, given the issues that we care about. Isn't that normal?
Well, mail doesn't get micro-targeted in the same way that digital advertising does, and it is not based on this information that only the platforms really have, based on the way we use their platforms. Nobody's going through my mail to see what I'm throwing out and what I'm reading and then designing ads based on that information. But that's exactly what the platforms are doing when they sell advertising. They say, we know exactly what this individual likes versus that individual likes. We can custom design an ad just for that individual.
The panel you're speaking on here at the State of the Net conference is called, Is Democracy Safe? What's your short answer to that question?
I'm not sure what the answer is, and that is a scary place to be.
Why are you not sure?
Well, as I said, I'm not read in on all the cyber efforts that are going on to block cyber warfare from our geopolitical adversaries. I trust and hope that DHS is on top of that and is working hard on it. But I think that after 2016, we really have seen very little legislation, very little regulation. We have not overtly responded very much to what we saw happen, to the attacks that we saw in 2016. And I think we need to take stronger steps. I think we need, as a nation, to come together and to send the word out to everyone else in the world to make it absolutely clear that we are not going to tolerate anybody mucking in our elections. There are bipartisan bills in Congress to address some of the issues that were raised in the 2016 election, and they cannot seem to get through. And I think that is a darn shame. There's, for example, a bipartisan act sponsored by Marco Rubio and Chris Van Hollen, the Deter Act, which would impose really strong sanctions against any foreign nation that tried to intervene in our elections. I think we need that kind of deterrence, and we need to make it clear to the world that we are going to take strong steps in order to deter bad conduct. Because I'm not sure that we're going to catch it as it comes in the door. These things morph and evolve very rapidly. We don't know if foreign adversaries are going to be using the same techniques in the next election that they used in the last election. But if we make it clear that there will be strong sanctions and we act to deter bad conduct, I think that we can safeguard our elections in a way that we so far have not done.
So technology is a threat to democracy.
It can be. It's when people first started using technology and digital platforms to do political messaging, a lot of people were giddy at the prospect of this low-cost medium that could spread the word widely. But I think we have learned that there are strong negative impacts. into our democracy from the way people are using and abusing the platforms to spread disinformation. The algorithms that these platforms use are designed to keep you on the platform, to keep you engaged, to keep you clicking away, and they have found that what works the best is to keep you outraged. Anger, strong emotions, that's what gets people on the platform and sticking to the platform, and that is not what's best for our democracy. We don't want to be constantly at each other's throats.
Does the Federal Election Commission have enough tools to work with this, or is this a congressional issue?
I think we need stronger laws. There are some things that the FEC could do if we had a quorum, although frankly, I was trying to strengthen our rules on disclaimers, on online advertising, and I've been working on that for years and was not getting good cooperation from the other side. So even something as small as that is a struggle to get passed, and has been at the FEC. We are, as I mentioned, where we don't have enough commissioners to adopt any new regulations right now. So any action right now would have to come from Congress. And when the commission does get reconstituted with new commissioners, I can only hope that they will be people who are willing to work across the aisle to try to address some of these strong and deep threats to our democracy.
Ellen Weintraub is one of 3 commissioners who sits on the FEC. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
And just a reminder that this Communicators program, as well as all others, are available as podcasts.
C-SPAN, your unfiltered view of government.